Welcome to CE 2100 Springer 1. In this second lecture on construction engineering and management, we will focus on defining requirements and managing stakeholders. This lecture has three key learning objectives. The first is to identify the typical stakeholders in construction projects and understand their needs. The second objective is to define project requirements. Specifically, we will explore different types of requirements and how to effectively define them. The third objective is to understand how to effectively document and communicate project requirements. Much of the content in this lecture is derived from the Project Management Body of Knowledge, which is also known as PMBOK Guide. For further details and a deeper understanding, you are encouraged to refer to this guide. Before diving into the key objectives of this lecture, let's first explore what a requirement is. According to the PMBOK, requirements include the quantified and documented needs, wants, and expectations of the sponsor, customer, and other stakeholders. Here is an example of a project requirement. Developer shall design and provide a safe area for maintenance technicians to park, access, and service roadside tolling infrastructure throughout both the period of construction work and operating period. A requirement typically uses the word shall to indicate that something is mandatory or required. So, why are requirements so important? Well, they play a crucial role for a few reasons. First off, when we define requirements early on, we set clear expectations for everyone involved. This helps all stakeholders understand what they can expect right from the beginning, which is super important for avoiding confusion later. Requirements give us a solid foundation for planning the project. They help the team figure out what needs to be done and guide the project's scope, budget, and timeline. Without this clarity, it can be challenging to stay on track. Next, requirements are essential for defining what deliverables are needed. They act as benchmarks for testing and validation. By clearly outlining what's expected, we can develop acceptance criteria that allow us to assess whether the project is hitting its goals. In short, having well-defined requirements helps ensure that everyone is aligned, keeps the project on track, and ultimately leads to better outcomes. Would you like to know more about how to gather and document requirements effectively? Now, let's dive into the requirements definition process. This figure shows the four main steps. It begins with identifying stakeholders, whose input is crucial for the project's success. Who are the project stakeholders? They're anyone affected by the project's activities or results, like the community where the project takes place. Stakeholders can also be those who have the power to influence, support, or oppose the project, such as the owner, designers, contractors, or subcontractors. And don't forget, stakeholders include anyone with a personal, financial, or professional interest in the outcome, like potential home buyers. This step is really important because research shows that if you don't address stakeholder issues, it often leads to project failure. To make sure you don't miss any stakeholders, it's a good idea to create a stakeholder list. This chart shows a typical list of stakeholders and their roles in construction projects, based on the PMBOK. In the middle, you'll see the primary stakeholders, like the project team members, which include the owner, design team, and contractor. Then, in the outer layer, we have other stakeholders, grouped into three categories. The first group includes people brought in by and working directly with the owner, like inspectors, financial institutions, and insurance providers. Inspectors help the owner by checking the design and construction work. Financial institutions provide funding for the project, while insurance providers offer financial protection against various risks. The second group includes people who are brought in by and work directly with the contractor, like subcontractors, suppliers, and insurance providers. Subcontractors handle specialized tasks where the main contractor might not have the right expertise or equipment. Suppliers provide the materials needed for construction, like gravel and concrete. Just like the owner, the contractor also needs to buy insurance to protect against potential financial losses from unexpected events, like natural disasters. The third group includes people who don't actually work on the project, but are interested in its outcome. For example, the local community can provide valuable feedback on how the project might affect them socially, economically, and environmentally. Understanding these impacts is key to making sure the project has a positive effect on the area. Unions also play a role here. They represent workers' interests and help ensure job security and fair treatment on construction sites. If feedback from these groups isn't gathered carefully, it could lead to costly strikes and project delays. Another important stakeholder is regulators, who focus on the safety of the constructed facility and the local land use plan. Understanding their expectations is crucial to ensure the project meets all local, regional, and national standards, helping avoid delays related to permits and certificates. After you create your stakeholder list, it's really important to engage with them and analyze their expectations. This whole process is known as project stakeholder management. Stakeholders often have a wide range of expectations, and sometimes one stakeholder's expectations can conflict with those of others. For example, community members might be worried about the environmental, social, or economic impacts of a project, while project owners and contractors might focus more on finishing the project quickly and making a profit. These differing priorities can create tension, so it's crucial to assess and prioritize stakeholders based on the overall project goals. The specific tool often used for stakeholder management is called the Power Interest Grid. According to the PMBOK, this quadrant method helps categorize stakeholders and develop strategies to manage them effectively. In this method, you place stakeholders on a 2x2 grid based on their level of interest and power. In the upper right corner, you have the key players, those who have high interest in the project and the power to influence its scope, timeline, and cost. You need to engage with these stakeholders regularly and closely manage their expectations. The upper left quadrant is for people who have power but low interest in the project outcome. Your goal here is to meet their needs and try to shift them to the right, because their low interest could pose a risk to your project. At the bottom of the matrix are people who don't have much power to influence the project. If they have high interest, make sure to keep them informed. If they have low interest, don't overwhelm them with too much information. However, you might need to put in some extra effort to engage them and boost their interest. These individuals can often provide valuable details for your project. The second step in the requirements definition process is to write down the requirements in a document. Before we learn how to define requirements, let's take a look at the different types of requirements. The first category is business requirements. These focus on the project's goals and objectives, like increasing a factory's capacity by 100%, sticking to a budget, meeting a timeline, or ensuring quality standards. Next, we have functional requirements. These detail the design specifications, such as dimensions, layout, materials, load-bearing capacity, and emergency exits. Finally, there are non-functional requirements. These are technical requirements that don't directly relate to specific functionalities, but are important for the overall effectiveness, performance, and sustainability of the constructed facility. For example, non-functional requirements might include no construction work at night, completing the project before the end of winter break, or ensuring that workers wear personal protective equipment during construction. To define requirements, you can use a few different methods. First, you might want to conduct one-on-one interviews with key stakeholders like clients, project managers, architects, engineers, and end users. This gives you a chance to have in-depth discussions about their needs and expectations. Another option is to organize collaborative workshops, or focus groups with different stakeholders. This way, you can gather diverse perspectives and brainstorm requirements together, which encourages dialogue and can help everyone reach a consensus on key points. If you need feedback from a larger group of people, using surveys and questionnaires is a great approach. You can send these out to a wider audience of stakeholders to collect quantitative data and insights about their expectations and priorities. Don't forget that construction projects must comply with various codes and standards. So, it's important to identify the relevant regulations and building codes that need to be met. Making sure you comply with these requirements is crucial for the project's success and safety. If needed, you can also research and analyze similar projects or facilities to identify best practices and standards. This benchmarking can provide valuable insights into successful requirements and help you set realistic expectations. Based on research, here are the top 5 reasons why requirements definition can go wrong. 1. Limited stakeholder involvement. 2. Overlooked stakeholders. 3. Unnecessary features. 4. Incomplete planning and design. And 5. Ambiguous requirements. To avoid unclear requirements, they should follow the SMART criteria. First, they need to be specific, meaning they use clear and concise language. Second, they should be measurable. You need to define clear criteria to know if the requirement has been met. For example, the building must support a load of 100 tons, or energy consumption must not exceed X kilowatt hours per month. Third, the requirements should be realistic and achievable. Make sure they are doable within the project's budget, timeline, and available resources. You want to avoid setting goals that are unrealistic or overly ambitious. Fourth, the requirements should be reasonable, meaning the effort required to meet them is worthwhile and brings a positive return on investment. Finally, each requirement should be traceable. This means you should be able to link each one back to its source, whether it's a stakeholder, regulation, or business objective. This makes it easier to track progress and manage any changes. After the requirements are written down, it's important to validate them before including them in the final documents. This step is crucial to make sure the requirements are accurate and complete before moving forward with the project's design or development. To verify requirements, you make sure they follow the SMART criteria. You also need to review and go over the requirements with the right stakeholders, explaining them clearly. Any feedback you get should be considered and used to revise the requirements as needed. Here are some example questions you might ask yourself to check if the project requirements are precise and complete. Once the requirements are validated, you can move on to the final step, documenting and sharing them with the relevant stakeholders. Specifically, in this final step, you finalize the requirements based on the verification process and then communicate them to the relevant stakeholders. At this stage, it's important to remember that no changes, additions, deletions, or revisions should be made without carefully reviewing how they might impact other requirements, including cost and schedule. To wrap things up, requirements are key to the success of any project. It's really important to involve all stakeholders early on to create a complete project requirements document. If the requirements are poorly defined, it can lead to costly rework and negatively affect the project's business outcomes. That's all for this video. Goodbye for now.